When she accepted the role, it was her very first offer to play the lead in a feature film. At that time, she thought it was exciting and enjoyable, and she did not hesitate to say yes. She was young, new to the industry, and eager to work. In 1982, Phoebe Cates became one of America's biggest fantasies almost overnight. By 1994, she had completely disappeared from the screen. What happened during those years was far more complicated and much darker than most people ever realized. She began filming nude scenes at the age of 17 in a remote desert location. By the time she turned 20, she had already appeared in several projects that focused more on her body than on her abilities as an actress. Later, she married a man 16 years older than her, had 2 children, and made a decision that stunned Hollywood. For more than 3 decades, she has lived a quiet life that most people would never expect from someone once so famous. Today, she is 62 years old, and if you passed her walking through Manhattan, you would likely never recognize the woman who once captured the attention of millions in a single movie scene. Phoebe Cates was born Phoebe Bell Cates on July 16, 1963, at New York Hospital in Manhattan. That detail is important because she was born into a world her family already understood very well. Her father was a Broadway producer and an early television pioneer who worked on popular game shows like The $64,000 Question. Her uncle later became a producer for multiple Academy Awards broadcasts during the 1970s and 1980s. From the outside, her life looked like a classic New York entertainment family story. But beneath that surface was a different reality. From a very young age, she was positioned as part of an entertainment legacy whether she wanted it or not. She grew up surrounded by the sounds and pressure of New York City and deeply inside its arts and performance culture. She attended Miss Hewitt School, an elite girls' school on the Upper East Side that served wealthy and well-connected families. Later, she transferred to the Professional Children's School, a place created specifically for young performers whose lives revolved around auditions, rehearsals, and work rather than normal school activities. That single change revealed a lot about her future. In those halls, she was surrounded by children who were already acting on Broadway or appearing in commercials, while most kids her age were focused on sports or social life. Having a producer father and a powerful uncle did not feel extraordinary to her. It felt like stepping into a family profession. At first, acting was not her main goal. Ballet was. By the age of 10, she was intensely focused on dance and trained in advanced New York programs connected to top schools. She earned a scholarship to the School of American Ballet, the official training school of the New York City Ballet, and studied there seriously for more than 3 years. Teachers believed she had real potential and treated her as someone who might eventually dance professionally. But her path changed suddenly. Around age 14, she suffered a serious knee injury that forced her to stop dancing completely. The future she had spent most of her childhood building disappeared almost overnight. Later, she would describe that moment as losing her first artistic identity. Losing something so important at such a young age left a deep emotional mark. It also explains why she later took risks that made her uncomfortable. In a competitive city like New York, standing still felt more frightening than stepping into something unfamiliar. To earn money, she began babysitting for family friends, which soon led to modeling opportunities. By age 10, she was already appearing in teen magazines. Things moved quickly. By 14, she appeared on the cover of 17 magazine, and between 1979 and 1980, she appeared on its cover 4 times. She also appeared in British Vogue and Andy Warhol's Interview magazine. Before she even turned 17, she had international recognition. Yet later she admitted she did not enjoy modeling. She found the work repetitive and said she did it only for the money. That honesty surprised many people, considering how visible and successful she was at the time. Her teenage years also brought her into New York nightlife. Through family connections, including Andy Warhol, she entered places most teenagers never saw. She went to Studio 54 for the first time in 1979 and began living more independently in Greenwich Village. Studio 54 was not just a club. It was a place where careers could change in a single night. Artists, photographers, agents, and filmmakers watched faces closely, deciding who might move from modeling to film. Somewhere in that world, she was pointed toward acting. Screen tests followed, and opportunities arrived quickly. That shift led to her first nude scenes in the film Paradise, shot in Israel in 1981 when she was only 17. It also led to massive sexual attention after Fast Times at Ridgemont High in 1982. Paradise was released in the United States in March 1982 and was clearly marketed as a copy of The Blue Lagoon. Two young people stranded in an exotic location, slowly discovering sexuality. The marketing focused heavily on her body, not her acting. Posters showed her in sheer clothing with suggestive taglines. She was instantly labeled a new teen sex symbol before she had time to establish herself as an actress. What made it even harder was her age. She was still a teenager when audiences first saw her nude on screen. The filming conditions were harsh, involving extreme heat, minimal privacy, and long days in remote desert locations. For someone trained in controlled rehearsal spaces, it was overwhelming. Critics were harsh. Many called the film exploitative and poorly made. Still, curiosity kept it alive, especially on late-night cable television. She learned early that attention does not always mean respect. Despite her serious training in dance and acting, media coverage focused almost entirely on her nudity. That image followed her. Fast Times at Ridgemont High amplified everything. Released in August 1982, it became a cultural moment. Her role as Linda Barrett made her unforgettable, especially the famous pool scene. She was only 19, yet the public image frozen around her was that of a fantasy, not a young woman still growing. Soon after, Private School and other films continued to push the same image. Posters and marketing reduced her to body shots and sexual appeal. By the time she was barely 21, she had appeared in multiple projects that leaned heavily on erotic imagery. Casting directors began to see her in only one way. Over time, the pressure and lack of creative freedom took their toll. Eventually, she chose a different life. She stepped away from Hollywood, focused on family, and built a quiet existence far from the spotlight. While many wondered why she disappeared, the truth was simple. She chose peace, privacy, and control over her own life. Her story is not just about fame, but about what it costs, especially when it comes too early and takes more than it gives. Reviewers had already started treating her like just another temporary sex symbol from the VHS era, someone meant to be consumed quickly and then forgotten. This was happening at the same time she was quietly auditioning for serious work. She wanted dramas, stage roles, and characters that relied on emotion and dialogue instead of nudity. But the industry could not separate her from the image it had already created. Producers had been trained by posters, magazine covers, and marketing campaigns to see only one thing: bikinis, shower scenes, bedroom moments. That image became a sealed box, and no matter how hard she tried, they could not unsee it. She did try to change direction. While teen sex comedies were everywhere, she leaned toward projects with heavier themes and more emotional weight. Lace gave her something different. It allowed her to explore vulnerability, abandonment, pregnancy, anger, and revenge. For once, she had space to speak and to act instead of simply being shown. But even then, the promotion worked against her. Television ads and magazine spreads focused on lingerie shots and sultry close-ups, selling the series like late-night soap rather than a serious drama. Years later, in 1993, she earned strong praise for Bodies, Rest, and Motion, where she played a tired young woman searching for meaning and direction. Critics noticed her depth and restraint. But the film barely reached the public. Without nudity or sex appeal to lean on, distributors did not seem to know how to market her. Again and again, when she moved toward grounded storytelling, the marketing pulled her back toward the same old image, quietly undoing the progress she was trying to make. Over time, the gap between who she was and how she was sold began to wear her down. She later admitted that much of her work felt repetitive and that she sometimes accepted roles simply for the money. Coming from someone once labeled the ultimate teen fantasy, that confession sounded tired rather than glamorous. Even today, many people point out how unnecessary the famous bikini scene in Fast Times feels compared to the rest of the film, which uses nudity carefully and sparingly. By the early 1990s, after marrying Kevin Kline in 1989 and having 2 children, she began stepping back. She turned down roles like Father of the Bride and chose a quiet life in Manhattan instead of continuing to play the same typecast parts. In a strange way, the only way she could truly take control of her image was by disappearing from public view. Then there was Gremlins. When it opened on June 8, 1984, she was only 20 years old, and everything shifted. The film became a massive success, earning more than $148 million worldwide on a modest budget. It was the biggest hit of her career. She played Kate Beringer, a small-town bartender in Kingston Falls, alongside Zach Galligan, in a film produced by Steven Spielberg and directed by Joe Dante. Just 2 years earlier, she had been frozen in slow motion in a red bikini. Now she wore sweaters, work uniforms, and stood inside a dark Christmas disaster rather than a fantasy sequence. Over time, critics and audiences began to point to Gremlins as the moment her image finally expanded. Halfway through the film came a scene that shocked viewers. Kate calmly explains why she hates Christmas, telling a story about being 9 years old and waiting for her father to come home on Christmas Eve. Days pass, the house grows cold, and then she discovers his body stuck in the chimney, dressed as Santa, having broken his neck while trying to surprise the family. The camera does not cut away. She delivers the story without tears or dramatic music, letting the horror sit quietly in her voice. For a 1984 PG-rated film, the moment was deeply unsettling. That monologue later became the scene many people point to as proof that Gremlins was darker than its playful marketing suggested and that she could handle strange, risky material with complete control. 6 years later, Gremlins 2 arrived in June 1990. This time, the chaos moved into a massive New York skyscraper owned by a loud media mogul. She returned as Kate, now navigating television studios, laboratories, and live broadcasts as the Gremlins turned the building into madness. The sequel leaned into humor and self-awareness. At one point, Kate starts another tragic holiday story, only for Billy to interrupt her, gently making fun of how odd the first monologue had been. The sequel earned less money than the original and divided critics at the time, but its cult following and strong reputation over the years kept her visible without relying on nudity or sex comedy. Between the two Gremlins films, she worked steadily, but nothing else captured the public in the same way. Lace left behind one of the most quoted lines in television history, later voted the greatest TV line by TV Guide, but it lived mostly as trivia. Films like Date with an Angel, Bright Lights, Big City, Shag, and Heart of Dixie were often praised for effort but quickly forgotten. Gremlins, meanwhile, continued to air every December. Toys, VHS tapes, posters, and reruns kept circulating. For millions of viewers, she became Kate with Gizmo, no matter what else she did. Her career burned brightly and then softened. Official film records show intense activity from 1982 through Princess Caribou in 1994, followed by near silence. Aside from a small role in the anniversary party in 2001 and a brief voice role in a video game in 2015, she stepped away completely. Many biographies mention how she was pushed into nude scenes at 17 and marketed as a fantasy before she fully understood the cost. After marrying Kevin Kline and having children in 1991 and 1994, she became selective. If a role was not worth leaving home for, she simply said no. Phoebe Cates met Kevin Kline during a strange turning point in her life, when Hollywood was just beginning to pull her in. It was around 1982 or 1983 during auditions for The Big Chill. She was 19. He was 16 years older, already trained at Juilliard, already a Tony Award winner, and carried the confidence of someone deeply rooted in theater. She did not get the role, and their paths could have ended there. But 2 years later, in 1985, they met again at the Public Theater in New York. This time, Kevin was serious. He pursued her openly and persistently, even hiring her former assistant just to get closer to her. Years later, she joked about her first impression of him, saying she thought he was gay after seeing him in Sophie's Choice because he came from theater and seemed so polished. It sounds humorous, but it also shows how closely she was watching him. Over time, that curiosity turned into something solid and real. When they married on March 5, 1989, it did not look like a typical Hollywood move. Instead of running toward a bigger spotlight, they settled into a brownstone on Manhattan's Upper East Side. That decision shaped everything that followed. They wanted children and made a deal to alternate work schedules so one parent would always be home. On paper, it sounded fair and simple. In reality, the balance often leaned one way. Offers kept coming for her, but again and again, she chose home. By 1991, their son Owen was born. By 1994, their daughter Greta arrived. That same year, she starred in Princess Caribou alongside Kevin. For most actresses, a lead role at 31 would be a launchpad. For her, it was a closing chapter. She stepped away to raise her children, choosing a life outside the industry's pressure. What could have been a 30-year screen career became a concentrated 12-year run. Her appearance in the anniversary party in 2001 surprised many people and looked like a possible comeback. But the truth was personal. The film was made by her close friend Jennifer Jason Leigh and felt more like a favor than a return. After that, she went back to New York and stayed there. In 2015, she briefly voiced her Gremlins character in a Lego video game, more like a nostalgic nod than a comeback. In 2005, she opened a boutique called Blue Tree on Madison Avenue. The shop became known for its carefully chosen items, from Japanese toys to handmade ceramics and specialty goods. It felt more like a warm living room than a luxury store. In the 1980s, her image was the product being sold. At Blue Tree, she became the one doing the choosing. Instead of posing for cameras, she curated objects and conversations. Many customers do not even recognize her. They chat with her about books or gifts and only later realize who she is. That anonymity gives her a freedom she never had when the world froze her at 18. By 2025, she turned 62, more than 40 years after Fast Times locked her into pop culture as an image that never ages. Real life, however, does. Recent photos show her with natural gray streaks and a quiet confidence. The shock people feel is not just about time passing. It is about seeing someone who stepped away and was allowed to age naturally. The world tried to freeze her, but she walked out of the frame and chose a life that did not need applause.